I thought I could finally build a life of my own when I moved 2 hours away from my mother. I was looking for independence, a fresh start, a chance to finally be free from her constant judgment and emotional manipulation. But instead, I ended up in an abusive relationship that quickly became a nightmare I couldn't escape. One night, things escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. My boyfriend, furious over something inconsequential, it's hard to even remember what it was anymore, lost control. He beat me, his blows landing with a force that made my vision blur and my head spin. I was left bloody and bruised, gasping for breath, in absolute terror that this might be my last night alive. He even threatened to take my life. I remember every one of those words, cold and heartless, as he spat them out. I was 9 weeks pregnant at the time. Both my mother and my boyfriend knew this. They knew I was carrying a life inside me, and still, that didn't stop him. Desperate and out of options, I picked up my phone and called the one person I thought would help, the one person who had always told me I could always come to her when I was in trouble, my mother. I thought she'd hear the pain and panic in my voice, that she'd finally put aside her disapproval and be the mother I'd always needed. But when she answered, and I tearfully told her what had just happened, she was silent for a long, painful moment. And then, as if my world wasn't already shattering, she said in the coldest tone I've ever heard, "You did it to yourself. I don't know what you expect me to do about it." In that moment, I realized I was truly alone. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to protect and care for me, was blaming me for the abuse. She wasn't just refusing to help. She was dismissing my pain, my fear, and the danger I was in, as if it were nothing more than a mild inconvenience to her. She had always been cold and distant, but this was cruelty I didn't think she was capable of. It was as though she felt a twisted satisfaction in watching me suffer. Months later, I would come to find out the darkest betrayal of all. My ex had been feeding her lies about me, twisting stories to make me out to be the villain, to turn her even further against me. And if that weren't enough, I learned that he had been sleeping with her. My own mother. The woman I had once hoped would be a safe haven in my life, someone I could count on in my darkest moments, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. She had sided with my abuser, both emotionally and physically, while I lay bleeding and desperate for help. The betrayal haunts me every day. It's not just the abuse I suffered at his hands, but the way my own flesh and blood turned against me when I needed her most. She didn't just abandon me, she betrayed me, in ways I still struggle to process. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. Here's an update to the Reddit story. It's been a few months since I first shared my story, and I wanted to give an update. This isn't the end of the journey, but I feel like I'm finally beginning to see a path forward, even if it's still painful and messy. After that night, I realized that my own safety and the safety of my unborn child had to be my top priority. With no support from my mother and the threat of violence hanging over me, I knew I had to leave, even if I didn't know how I'd do it. I took it one step at a time, carefully planning each detail, and leaning on a few friends I hadn't spoken to in ages. It was hard to open up, to admit to anyone what was going on, but their support was honestly my lifeline. I found strength in myself that I didn't know I had, but I also found strength in these friends, who reminded me that I deserved better, that my child deserved better. After some time, I found a small support network through a local women's shelter. They helped me with resources I didn't even know existed. Counselors, legal aid, a place to stay temporarily. They guided me through the terrifying steps of a protection order, which I honestly didn't believe would work, but thankfully, it did. I managed to safely get away from my ex, and though there are still complications, I feel a weight lifted that I've carried for far too long. I've learned that just because someone is a parent doesn't mean they'll act like one, and that sometimes we have to be our own advocates, even in the loneliest, scariest of times. As for my mother, I've had no contact with her since that night. A part of me is tempted to reach out, hoping she might somehow have realized the depth of her betrayal. But I know better. I know that someone who can stand by and turn a blind eye to their own child's suffering is unlikely to suddenly develop compassion. I want to say I don't care, that her absence means nothing to me, but I'd be lying. Some nights I ache for the mother I always wished I had, a mother who would have held me and told me everything would be okay. But that's a fantasy. The reality is, she made her choice, and I have to make mine. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding. It's slow, and the pain runs deep, but every day that I wake up without fear feels like a small victory. I'm still scared for what the future holds, still processing all that's happened, but I'm determined to create a life that's free from fear and betrayal, not just for me, but for my child. Thank you to everyone who reached out, who shared kind words and advice. You've been a comfort in ways you can't imagine. I'll continue to update as I figure things out. This isn't over, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Here's the final update to the Reddit story. It's been a long road, but I'm finally ready to share what I hope will be my last update. So much has happened since I first reached out here, and I'm grateful for everyone who has supported me, believed in me, and shared their own stories. This journey has been one of the most painful chapters of my life, but it's also been a path to something I never imagined for myself: peace. After months of counseling, court hearings, and seemingly endless sleepless nights, I finally found a safe place to call home. It's a small, cozy apartment, nothing fancy, but to me, it feels like a fortress. Every time I turn the key in the lock, knowing it's my own safe space, it reminds me of how far I've come. My child was born healthy and strong, and having them in my arms made everything worth it. Every hardship, every betrayal, every tear I cried. It all pales in comparison to the love I feel when I look at my child. I'm determined to give them a life full of love, safety, and support, the things I never had but know they deserve. As for my mother, I decided to cut ties completely. After everything that happened, after her betrayal and the devastating realization that she chose to believe lies and side with someone who hurt me, I knew I had to let go of the hope that she would ever be the mother I needed. For a long time, I struggled with guilt, wondering if cutting her off made me a bad daughter. But through therapy and a lot of soul searching, I realized that protecting myself and my child doesn't make me cruel or ungrateful. It just means I've learned to prioritize the people who truly care about me. I won't lie, there's still a part of me that aches when I think of the relationship we could have had. But I also know now that clinging to someone who actively hurts me will only keep me trapped in the cycle of pain and disappointment. I had to let go to move forward, and I'm finally at peace with that decision. As for my ex, he's completely out of the picture. The restraining order is still in place, and I've taken every legal precaution to protect myself and my child. I've been working with a lawyer to ensure that he has no claim to custody, and thankfully, it looks like he'll have no way back into our lives. The fear I used to live with every day has faded, and though there are moments when the memories come back, they don't have the same hold over me. I'm free in a way I haven't been in years. The biggest surprise in all of this has been the community I've found. People I never would have thought to reach out to. Neighbors, old friends, even some of you here on Reddit have come through in ways I never expected. It's incredible how, even after so much betrayal, there are people out there willing to listen, to help, and to remind me that I'm not alone. I'm learning to trust again, slowly, and I'm beginning to rebuild the life I've always wanted. I still have hard days. There are times when the trauma resurfaces, and I wonder if I'll ever truly feel normal again. But now I know that I have the tools to deal with those moments. I have a support network, a safe home, and a beautiful child who fills my life with joy. I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be, and that strength didn't come from anyone else. It came from me. That's something no one can ever take away from me. So this is where I leave this story. I'm closing the door on the past, not because I'm forgetting it, but because I'm ready to step into the future. Thank you to everyone who has walked this path with me, who has shared their words of encouragement and given me the strength to keep going. You've helped me find hope when I didn't think it was possible. To anyone else going through something similar, know this: you are stronger than you think, and you are never as alone as you feel. Healing is possible, and happiness, real, honest happiness, is out there waiting for you. I'm proof of that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.